So my feeling about it is this. I mean, as I said first during that, during that interview, there was a huge sense of relief when you realised that actually it was all going to come together, and what it wasn't going to. Because the thing you dread is revisiting something that was kind of epochal and getting the sense that there is anything about it that isn't there for artistry's sake, but is there for being a cash-in sake, and that is always the worry. And my feeling about Trainspotting, the first time I saw Trainspotting, I remember this very clearly because I was working at Radio 1 at the time. Firstly, I was startled by it. I mean, I think it's much more influenced by horror cinema than people remember. I think all the sort of the visions of the baby and the ceiling and all that stuff is really kind of, almost Exorcist 3 Mrs. Clelia references. And the film was this kind of sort of full throttle, visceral, kinetic, sort of explosion, which did change the way in which popular British cinema looked. Sometimes for the better, and occasionally for the worse, because you saw so many things afterwards trying to ape it. What I really liked about T2 Trainspotting is that it seemed to be a film that was aimed at somebody who had been there the first time round and had subsequently aged. And whether or not the distributors will thank me for saying this, I think that as a 54-year-old man looking at that film, it felt like it was speaking to me. It is a film about aging. It is a film about regret. It is a film about the way that the years fall away and your perception of the world changes. And even the film itself, because for a start, you're revisiting characters who the first time you saw them, were skinny and sinewy and, and sort of living on that kind of, adrenal rush. And now, 20 years later, they're not. There's a joke at the very, very beginning, which is that we replace, the feet on the street with the feet on the treadmill. And that sort of sets the tone of the movie. And then, for me, what I think the film is about, obviously the narrative, the plot, is to do with extortion, addiction, prostitution, vengeance, almost Death Wish style vengeance. Actually, what the film is about memory and about masculinity and about what it means to remember. I mean, it's funny because there's obviously that's the speech at the beginning and end of Shallow Grave about trusting your friends and what does it mean if you don't trust your friends. And this is a recurrent theme, I think, throughout Danny Boyle's work, which is its bonds of friendship over time and the way in which memory basically becomes a time machine and transports you backward and forward in time. I loved the way that the film was constantly looking at Trainspotting in the same way that that you remember people, in the same way that you remember this, the thing, Mark, what have you been up to for 20 years? And I felt that it was a tangible sense of that distance. I mean, obviously the way that the characters have physically changed, the way that the world has changed, the way that filmmaking itself has changed around them. Also, I didn't mean that comment lightly when I said that Danny Boyle comes in a tradition which goes Powell and Pressburger, Ken Russell, Nick Rogue. I mean, although there's a lot of Alan Clark in, actually also in his career in terms of, what's influenced him, those aspirations toward making films that have a visionary edge, that have a fantastical edge, that are using the medium of cinema to do something which transcends just a down-to-earth gritty story. That's where he comes from. And that's one of the reasons why the great joy of Trainspotting was that it gave voice to characters who otherwise would be silenced or sort of written off as deadbeat. And you get the same thing here. Funnily enough, the surprise for me was how much Spud becomes the central character, how much it's about Spud finding his voice, how much it's about Spud's world, almost more so than Renton's world. And so I really liked it. And my if I have any reservation at all, it would simply be that I don't know whether a 54-year-old man who saw Trainspotting the first time round really liking it is enough. I have no idea what a young audience would make of it. I have no idea what an 18-year-old would. I mean, I wasn't 18 when I saw the first one, but I have no idea what that film would feel like if you don't have that baggage. And that is incidentally not a criticism of the film. It is just that my feeling is it's a film that's best appreciated if you saw Trainspotting 20 years ago and all those things, memory and everything, all come together in the experience of watching T2.
I reckon an awful lot, and it depends how we're defining young people, but I reckon an awful lot of them will have seen Trainspotting anyway. So even though it was a huge 90s moment, even if they were born late 90s or in this millennia, they will still have seen this movie and therefore it will still work for them.
Yes.
What did you think about the clips from the original movie, which are actually in this movie too?
Yeah, you see, that's what I mean about memory. That's exactly what I mean about the way in which as you're walking down the street, you're constantly pulling cards out of a pack that are from your memory of the world. And that seemed to be what the film was doing. That's why when I say, although the film appears to be about, we were saying it's a sex shop or extortion, all those sort of things, it's not really about that. I mean, it's about that, but it's not in the same way that Jaws isn't about a shark. What it's actually about.
No, that doesn't work.
Well, it does work because the primary concern of the film is actually about memory and regret and aging and masculinity in crisis. And it makes particular sense that the memory of that film is 20 years ago for me.